What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Gotta Z, here with another podcast episode. And I hope everybody has been taking care of themselves, mind, body, and spirit, because that's what it's all about. We got to have all three of those things in integration. Without that, we are out of alignment. We are out of balance somewhere in our lives. And welcome back. If you are joining again, and if you are new to this podcast, be sure to go ahead and follow me in the respective places. If you're on Spotify, follow me there. If you're on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And on this episode, this is going to be a really special episode because it won't just be me speaking. So you'll definitely want to tune into the conversation. But before we get into that, you guys know how I do. I like to go ahead and get some business out of the way. And this time it's going to be pretty short, anyways, which is basically you can follow me on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, on YouTube, also on Substack at Holistic and Spiritual AF. That's all spelled out. That's Holistic and Spiritual AF. And I'm doing different things over there. And I'm also adding some visuals for those who like to, add a little watch to their listen. So this particular episode, I'm not going to be doing the video. So this will be like a straight up audio podcast. And I was actually interviewed by another podcast host. So that's what's exciting about this episode. The podcast host's name is Aleshia Moyamba, and I actually met her on Substack, and she reached out to me because she saw some of the things that I had been posting in regards to ancestral connection and ancestral veneration and things like that. And so she invited me to be a part of her podcast. So that is actually what this is about. I'm going to allow you guys to listen in to the conversation and what it is that we're talking about and how we're vibing on the ancestral connection. There's going to be a lot of really solid information as far as ancestral healing, different types of rituals, how we can honor our ancestors, as well as ancestral veneration. So you definitely don't want to miss this episode. And if you're somebody who likes to know about how to connect with your ancestors or how to start to heal generational trauma in your life, you'll definitely want to make sure you're following me or subscribe to my YouTube channel. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get into the conversation.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I love the work that you do. I think ancestral work is so important, especially today where so many things I feel like are pulling us away from ancestry work, whether it's distance, whether it's technology, whether it's just the influx of distraction that's happening all the time. So I really want to use this time to talk about ancestral healing, work, and everything in between. So I want to start with, honoring our ancestors. Can you talk about what is honoring our ancestors and why is it so important for us?
Sure. Absolutely. Honoring our ancestors can be as simple as remembering them, just calling on their name, talking about the good things that they did. And I think one of the misconceptions about reaching out to our ancestors is a lot of times, particularly people over here in America, because we were pulled away from a lot of our culture, we have very limited knowledge of that. I think we kind of get nervous about, oh God, well, we don't know where we came from, and I don't know how to do that. So you start where you're at. We've had people who have passed before us in our lifetime, so we start commemorating them, remembering the things that they used to like, that they used to do, asking family members about other family members before us, maybe some that we had never met. A lot of that's very helpful because sometimes we'll have a lot of traits and things that we do. Like, for instance, I like to write, and nobody else in my family likes to write except for my grandmother. My grandmother has always had that, and so different things like that. You start to find out a little bit more about yourself and where you came from. So honoring your ancestors is important for that. For honoring them, because once we are done with this physical life, the spirit transcends to somewhere else, to another spiritual dimension, and they're not gone. They're only gone and they're only lost if we don't call on them, if we don't remember them. So honoring our ancestors is just extremely important. It's going to help you to stay connected with who you are, as well as to bring them closer so that you can hear better the guidance and wisdom that they have for you in this lifetime, because that's how our ancestors and spirit guides walk with us, because they want to help to assist us along the journey, not tell us what to do, but give us guidance and wisdom to make our lives better and easier. That's ancient, old tradition that goes back in most indigenous cultures, and most indigenous cultures have some strong practice of ancestral honoring, remembrance, and this starts out with that. I mean, you can go even further into things like setting up of altars. And that can get tricky for a lot of people because they won't do it because they'll overcomplicate that too. They'll be like, well, I don't have any pictures and I don't have any this, I don't have any that. Your intention is like the strongest thing you can have. If you're trying to reach out to a grandmother, an aunt, a grandfather, father, whoever it is, they know that. They know that. So an altar can be as simple as a cup of coffee and a glass of water and a candle. That candle itself and being able to speak to that ancestor through the flame is very, very powerful. Once you start opening those doors, you'll start to hear them more, and they'll start telling you what to do next. Hey, you know what? I really like XYZ. And then you can start placing those things on the altar and learning, different things to honor your ancestors the way they would prefer.
Yeah. You mentioned when you open up that door, man, once you open up that door, it is all the way open. So in 2018, I discovered that my maternal lineage is traced to the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. And so right about that time, I started listening to a little juju podcast, and she was talking about African traditional religion. And then she was talking about ancestral veneration as a big part of that. And I actually was scared to do it. And I think it's because of, how I was raised. And whenever I mentioned a horoscope, oh, that's witchcraft. Or whenever I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
anything that didn't have to do like with the Holy Trinity, it was automatically shut down. And so she had mentioned a book, and it said an invocation prayer, a glass of water, and a white candle. And I at first thought it was a fluke. I'm not gonna lie. I thought it was a fluke, but I kept doing it every single day. And I think by like the 7th or the 10th day, my great grandmother Magnolia came through.
Ooh.
And she said, I heard you was looking for me. Well, here I am.
That sounds very Nigerian.
And so I told my mother, because I don't have any memories or recollection of my great grandmother. And she said, that is very much something, that your great grandmother would say. So what I have found is that through honoring the ancestors is that I'm able to connect with people who passed away in a totally, totally different way. Like if I have a problem or a question, I set the intention before I go to bed, and then they'll come in, say something, show something, and then they'll leave. And
Mm-hmm.
so, can you talk about a little bit about why consistency is important with that too? Or is consistency important when we're honoring our ancestors?
Absolutely. Consistency with anything is just going to make you better. It's going to make you stronger. I just did a podcast episode talking about intuition. It's the same thing. It's kind of like a muscle, same thing with ancestral worship, honoring, veneration. You want to do it consistently because it's building a relationship. You're going to start to build a relationship. You got to remember these are ancestors, like you said, we don't know necessarily, but they want to help. And so like your grandmother coming to you saying, hey, I'm here. What can I help you with? Like, you calling me, you looking for me, and the way that she said it in a way as if it didn't surprise her that you would come to her at some point. A lot of who we are in our spirit and our ancestry and our family lineage is in our DNA, so for you even to be seeking that out, something's calling you to do that. You're in your inner spirit and your ancestors want to help you and give you information to help you in this life. So consistency is going to be very important. It's just going to make you more in tune with the spirit realm, and your ancestors walk with you, not just at night. Some people are better at dreams. Some people are better at mediumship. Some people are better at, intuition, psychic, there's some people are branch into healing, the herbs. I mean, it goes in so many different levels. So the more consistent you are, the more you're going to find out about what lies in your DNA, like what it is that you resonate with. And I'll give you an example. I think it was about 2021. I started tapping into this it was this weird thing. It was a Facebook live, and the guy was like, the problem is you guys are not reaching out to your ancestors, you're not leaving them water. And it hit me like he was talking to me directly, because he was right. I wasn't being consistent with it. And so I went on a journey. I like immediately got up and I set up the altar, and I went on this journey for like a year straight, where every single day I was doing something with my ancestors. I was coming to that altar, I was leaving different things, I was doing incense, and then it catapulted me into the herbal realm. And I was like, wow, I had never had any experience with that. I had friends that were, and I always wanted to know about that. And what I didn't even realize is that the herbal realm is a whole nother spiritual realm. Like those little plants and herbs literally are spirit bodies that talk to you, that can, tell you how to put things together. And it just grew into amazing things. My dreams got stronger. My prayers were better. My invocation, my tarot readings were better. They were assisting me along the way, particularly with the herbs. I would not know what to do. I didn't know nothing about nothing. And so I was so in tune with them. They would just be like, you want to grab that? You want to use this for this, Not only did that help me in putting things together for ritual purposes, but it helped with cooking. Like I literally felt like I had 7, 8 grandmamas and aunties in the kitchen telling me, put a little bit of that in there, but just shake some of that in there, put that. And I started using herbs I had never cooked with before. And people were like floored with my food. They was like, oh my God, they was like, it's the flavor. And I was just like, wow, they really took me to a next level. So there's just so many different ways that you will begin to grow with them by your side. And they were all throughout the day for so many different things, they can help you find things, they can help you to remember things, you walk with them, and you start to build this relationship with them that is like as if they're here almost, and so the consistency is going to help with that, because if you're not doing it consistently, then you kind of won't know who's who's talking. Is that my lower self talking to me, or is that, my ancestors guiding me? And you kind of lose that connection with the inner realm too. So consistency is always going to help you to strengthen that.
Thank you. One
You're
of the
welcome.
things you just tapped on was DNA, and it said that trauma, especially for African descendants, for those who ancestors were part of the slave trade, that trauma and trauma related experiences are embedded in our DNA. So what are the steps, or what are some steps that we can take to start unraveling some of that trauma that's embedded in our DNA and start healing it?
Absolutely. So the first thing is awareness. Like that's always the first step with anything, is being aware that there's some patterns that are not working. We can go from our own experience mostly, or what we saw, particularly as children and how we grew up. That's going to affect just our whole world, and even before we have children, it can start to affect the relationships that we have, so awareness is going to be the first step. And once you're aware, then you have to kind of make a decision that, hey, either I want to be, take the red pill or the blue pill, and go against the grain, because for some people they may be the first person in their family to even go through some sort of healing. So they're not going to get that support from the backside. They're going to have to literally go outside of their family dynamics and start seeking other forms of healing. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to therapy at some point, and that's kind of what started it for me, because we started exploring alternative ways of healing. We started talking about meditation. We started talking about yoga. And those things are very beneficial because it taps you into your spirit body. Like even before I could even know who my ancestors were, even though they had been with me since I was a child. I couldn't articulate that. I didn't know that because I wasn't being taught that either. I grew up in a really religious family. And so I had to start to work on my own spirit body. And so the yoga was about breathing, it was about meditation, it was about being in tune with my body, it was about listening to my inner voice. All of those things kind of started the journey. It was also talking with somebody, having that safe space to be able to talk to a therapist was very different than the way I grew up. I grew up in a household was we don't talk about our business, and we had way too many secrets in the house, and those secrets was keeping us sick. So I was very expressant, and that kind of started it for me. And then after that, once I hit the meditation, I knew something was up with that because I was like, this is different. This is, pulling me outside of my body to other levels of consciousness. And I wanted to know more. So I got into books and I got into communities. And back then, it was kind of turning into the trend. And so you could find it, but it wasn't a lot of people that looked like me. So I would always be the youngest and the only, like, and I was like, but I still kept hanging on because I was having my own experience as well. Now it's a lot different. The vibration on the planet is totally different, and many more people are getting conscious and looking and exploring individual spiritual evolution. And so that's the start. Once you just start there and start getting around like-minded individuals, and your spirit and your ancestors are going to lead you to the right people. And so next thing you know, you're doing this, you're working on this, you're finding this form of healing. It's going to take you where you need to be for your level of consciousness at the time as it continues to expand. So once you start doing that, you change thoughts, behaviors, and then how you treat the next generation.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. How do your ancestors show up for you?
They show up in all kinds of ways. That's the beauty of having a relationship with your ancestors. I've got different ones. I've got high ascended ones, that come down for serious stuff. They're like, no mess around. Like, don't call me if you playing games. You know what I'm saying? We're coming here for changes, and so those are the ones when there's complex things going on in my life that they usually will be tell me stuff. Then I've got ones that are kind of like walk with me every day, and we cut up. They joke, they know my sense of humor. I'll be thinking something, somebody will say something, and it's just like a relationship like that. I've got some that are just strictly for divination because I'm working with that and constantly getting better and different things with that. So I work with certain ones for that. I have ancestors I work with when it comes to healing because I tapped into that as I was going through my healing. Then I found out that there was a strong connection to me as a facilitator of healing. So there's a whole nother set of ancestors and spirit guides for that. So they show up every day in all types of ways. And then sometimes they'll show up in dreams. They show up any way that I'm going to get it.
Yeah, my ancestors primarily come through dreams. And one of the things I want to touch on is I think even when you start thinking about it or having a little bit of an intention, you said that the door is open. And yes, the doors will open really wide. But one of the things that started happening to me as I started connecting with them is that I got really scared. I thought that the information that I was getting, I was like, there's no way for me to know this. And how am I going to share this? So eventually, I remember one particular experience where I was in Colorado with my husband. It was at the beginning of the pandemic. And we said, we're out. We're going to go travel in a car. We were safe. We were by ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I remember I had two dreams specifically while I was there. One, I was in my grandmother's home and I saw, she used to have like, those old school entertainment centers. And then you had all the photos, but then all of the photos like shattered. And then it was the only photo that was left was of this really handsome chocolate skinned man. And he was in a military uniform, but I had never seen that picture when I was there at her home. So I remember I asked my mom, I said, Mom, do you know anything about a man in the military, really gorgeous smile, chocolate skin? And she was like, Oh, we think your great grandfather was in the military, but I didn't know anything about that. And then I had another experience where the name Diane kept coming up. And I was like, You know anything about a Diane Flowers? And then she was like, How do you know that? And so, how do we
Wow.
become more comfortable with that? I know consistency is another part, but can you give us some advice on how to lean into that a little bit more so we can kind of understand that what we're doing when we are connecting with our ancestors isn't a fluke, it isn't fake?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, based on what you're experiencing, you have specific ancestors that are willing to assist you in breaking into it. So, if they know that you are predisposed to the gene where you can hear them, you can understand them. So they're not going to come to anybody else like that. They know that she can hear us, and they're not going to do it in a way that's going to scare you because it scared you the last time. So they're trying to do it in a way that gets you to seek to, like your mom, and you're saying, hey, you're asking your family, like I said, who are these people? And they're picking people who are close, who are close to the line, not people 400 years ago that nobody knows. And so you can work with those. You can start to work with the ones who have come to you. And something I think is very effective in the beginning is setting up that altar with the glass of water and the candle, because those are mediums and gateways through the spirit realm, and ancestral journaling. So asking questions and then sitting in front of, you do your invocation, sit in front of this candle, set everything up, and you ask questions and you sit there and you write. After a period of meditation, sit there and write. And the information that's going to come from the writing, you're going to be like, that's not from me. You're going to know that I didn't just, you know, do that, and that's a form of allowing them to come through and give you messages. And you can just ask questions. You don't have to be afraid. You can ask questions. Why are you here? Why did you come to me? What are the next steps? What messages do you have for me? That's always a good one, because a lot of times you don't know what the messages are, and the messages that you receive are applicable for what you're going through in your life. So that's a great way to start. I wouldn't try to cast the net so broad. I would go for the ones who've come to you. You said, was it Magnolia? The Linda, was it? Or Diane? Diane.
It was a Diane, and then my great grandma Magnolia, and then no one could tell me my grandpa Robert's father, the man who was in the military. No one can tell me his name.
Yeah, so I would probably start with Magnolia and Diane, especially if they have good things to say about them, because there's certain people in our ancestral realm, particularly that have closely passed, you don't want to call on. Like, I don't call on certain people because when they were here, they weren't good people. So I don't go to them for things. I go to the ones that I trust. My very first one was my great grandmother, because I had such a strong telepathic relationship with her. She was the quietest person in my family. She was so civilized. She was always calm, and she babysat me for like the first part of my childhood. And I just loved being around her because her energy was so peace, her vibe was so zen, and we like never really talked. We just had this relationship where we was moving around and doing stuff. And she may have said one or two things, and I just loved her energy. And as she got older and she became bedridden, I would stay in the room with her. I would come upstairs with her to get some peace, because everybody else was chaotic and noisy and dysfunctional. And I was like, I want to go be around her. And so I never forgot her. She died when I was 11. She was born in 1900. And I remembered her, and I always thought about her. Even before I knew what was going on, I always would think about her when I was in dark times in my life, when I was doing something I have no business doing. I would think about her. And so when it was time to start getting into it, she was the first person. She was my representative because I knew I could trust her, and she was always with me. So just those simple steps of honoring and remembering our ancestors. When it is time to start calling on them, you'll have some people to call on. You'll have some spirits that that are familiar.
I want to talk a little bit about, or actually a lot of bit, about this book that you just wrote called The Five Stages of Shadow Work. It came out, I
Yay.
think, roughly 3 weeks ago ish.
Top of May. Yep, top
Top
of
of May,
May.
a little bit longer than 3 weeks. So, can you talk to me about the inspiration for the book and why shadow work is an important component in all spiritual practices?
Yes, good question. So shadow work is, is intertwined in every form of healing there really is, because there's stages to it, and it's kind of loaded, and the process can be a couple of days, it can be a couple of weeks, or it can be years, depending on the level and effects of the trauma. So the 5 stages of shadow work actually kind of breaks it down into different stages, and I also go into different examples that you can expect and experience in the process. So the first one is going to be awareness, which I talked about a lot, and then sometimes we can be aware of something and not actually do anything about it. So the second one is going to be self-reflection. I'm sorry, recognition and acknowledgement. Now, when you know that, okay, awareness, now I know this is not working for me, and I dive off into that. The third one is going to be understanding and compassion. Now I'm starting to get more understanding about what happened, why those people did what they did, and why I experienced what I experienced, because they didn't know, because it happened to them. So instead of me being mad and adding a new form of trauma on top of trauma, I can now start to have some understanding and compassion for them and be able to move to the next level. Integration is talked about as the fourth step, and integration is really important because now I'm starting to learn parts of shadow that needs to not be there and parts of shadow that needs to be balanced out, and how to use that properly. And sometimes that comes in the forms of talents, and different ways of being able to positively use some of that shadow side. And then, of course, our last final stage is going to be transformation and growth. Yay. That's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to not be held hostage by pain and past hurts and things that we have no control over, but actually growing to greater understanding so that we can then do what's necessary for the next generation, and so that they don't know about any of that stuff. So yeah, that is available right now on Amazon Kindle, as well as paperback, and I'm in the process of working on getting it in some other places as well too. So once again, that was an inspiration by the ancestors. I love them. They always do that. Sometimes they'll tell me, because I trust them so much. They'll say, hey, you should do that. Like my podcast started out being a just do the podcast, and I actually did a podcast episode recently about shadow work, and I went in and I just channeled spirit, like through the whole thing. And when I was going back to get it edited and listen, I was like, wow. I was like, you went in. I was like, that should be a book. That's what I heard. They was like, you should have made that a book. And I was like, okay, never wrote a book before. And but I have a lot of experience with shadow work, because shadow work, like you said, is intertwined in many different faith-based belief systems. And really what it is that deeper level of healing, getting to the roots of different types of trauma that we have experienced in order to get to the other side and not be repeating that pattern. Also finding out ways that we have started showing up in the world and being able to right size that. Some behaviors have just been completely misused and need to be just removed. Like, for instance, if there's any kind of abuse going on, whether it's verbal, physical, emotional, we need to like get rid of that. You don't need that. That doesn't serve any place and any purpose in anything of higher consciousness. But there may be certain types of energies about us that have been misused that actually have benefit. So, you may be somebody that is angry a lot. That anger is passion and can be used for creativity. You may be somebody who is experiencing something that goes like we talk about things being in our DNA. So you may not have gone through it in your childhood, but your grandfather may have been like that. So it's just so intertwined in everything. I think my story in particular is so riddled with trauma in the beginning, and nobody was talking about trauma. Nobody was talking about healing. Everybody was lashing out, doing the best they could based on what they had experienced. And it messed me up in the beginning at the top of my life. And then I had my girls so early. So for me, I had to do this long process of healing, starting with myself first, and I had to start healing my emotional body. And it started with that awareness, like I was talking about. And then I had to start going through things. And I just continued being led to different places. But shadow work is so intertwined and deep in everything that we do.
Awesome. We're all going to make sure that we check out that book. We're all going to make sure that we support Zipporah.
Thank
Zipporah,
you.
this conversation was uplifting, it was clarity, it was confirmation. If someone is listening to this podcast episode and they're like, okay, I heard everything that y'all saying, what's the first step I can take? If I don't get anything else from this podcast, what's the first step that I can take right now to start deepening my relationship with my ancestors? What would that step be?
So that step would be as simple as that question. What's the first step that I can take towards deepening my relationship with my ancestors? So either you can start to go and ask the family members about people and pictures that are inside of the house, or you can do that journaling that I talked about, light a candle, somewhere. It doesn't even have to be a full out altar, and, say a quick prayer that you want to call forth your ancestors for information and ask that question. What is the next step in order for me to get closer to you?
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom
You're
and your
welcome.
brilliance with us.
Thank you so much for having me.